Well, thank you, Heather. I appreciate that glowing introduction, and welcome everyone. On behalf of School of Criminology, Criminal Justice, and Strategic Studies at Tarleton State, I welcome you and glad you joined this first informative topic. Just before we get started, I wanted to try to tell a story to try to get the importance of what it is we're talking about today. Imagine yourself going down a highway, freeway, many of us do that, and you notice on the right-hand side or left-hand side a vacant building. That building is maybe it's in good repair, maybe not, but we see a for sale sign in front of it. And what I want to make everyone aware of, that organizations only exist because of the people in them. So we're going to focus on that, and hopefully we're going to talk about the importance of this topic, the three most important functions of a leader, the establishing expectations of a harmonious work environment. We're going to talk about onboarding and what that means to you and how you can start creating a culture of harmonious work environment and also a culture where work is expected. Then we're going to talk about the new paradigm of organizations. I call it the diamond. Many organizations operate and look like in hierarchical formats. We'll talk about a different way to look at an organization. We're going to talk about the rule of stars, both what I call bright stars and dark stars. Then we're going to talk about the specific ways to deal with these whining, sniveling malcontents by commitment to challenge those people on a regular basis. And we'll talk about the process. I'll give you some tools that you can use that have been tried and true through my over 33 years experience as a chief of police in 4 different cities. And believe you me, I've had more than my fair share of whining, sniveling malcontents to deal with. And quite frankly, I've learned a lot more by my mistakes than I have my successes. But I'm going to share with you those skill sets. And we're going to talk about the 3 most important roles of a leader, and then most important leadership model, in my opinion. And then we'll summarize today's class. So first off, I want you all to sit back, grab a cup of coffee or a drink of your choice, and enjoy the course. But first, sit back and shut your eyes. Just play along with me. I promise you, I'm not going to try to hypnotize you. And I'm going to have some descriptors that we're going to go through, and as we go through those descriptors, and they'll be building a case for a person. And when we get through, I want you to put a person's face on these descriptors. These descriptors are constantly creating drama, always complaining about something, and many times those somethings are small and sometimes big things. Usually criticizing management about some problem or lack of leadership ability. Always challenging in a negative way the announcements of the organization's leadership, speaking negatively of the organization, especially leadership, to others outside or inside the organization. They work harder at not working, but tries to make everyone else look like they're the ones not working. They have a negative attitude about work, life, and the organization's leadership. Now, ask yourself, is a person's face come to mind there? Then my question is to you, why is this person still working in your organization? So we're going to talk about that person or persons. Many times they're in a smaller group. That may be one, it may be more, but I assure you these people are creating a great deal of problem within your organization, even if you have a small one. So we're going to talk about how we can challenge them. These people are caustic employees that dominate your time. We need to shift our focus to the middle of our organizations, the people who need just mentors, coaches, and leadership. This is the gist of the purpose of this webinar, is to focus on this problem, to create a process for challenging these people, and then create opportunities to be more effective leaders, and most importantly, to allow you to create an awesome work environment. So what is a WSM? So we look at that as people that we experience constantly creating charm. Taking that from the metaphor of fishing, it's obviously they constantly chum the waters of your organization. They're creating dissension. They go into your workplace. For police departments, that might be a roll call, where they're constantly criticizing, constantly bringing drama to the organization. They constantly complain about having to do work. They typically focus and study the SOPs of the organization. They want to know them better than you so that they can throw them back in your face when you try to challenge them on their behaviors. They constantly bring negativity to the workplace. These people usually create followership among others that like themselves, but in many cases, they're creating dissension within the workplace. A lot of your workers don't want to hear that. They would rather come to work, have a good time, do their jobs, go home, instead of having this individual come in and ruin their day. And they tend to monopolize the time and efforts of supervisors, managers, and directors. Some employees will leave the top organization because they do not want to work in this caustic environment. Those are the people we want to try to keep, and we want to try to encourage those who are creating contention in the workplace to, one, change their ways to leave. Many of these people display what I call victimology. Whining, sniveling, malcontents outwardly project behaviors and beliefs that are closely related to this victimology. They see themselves as victims of the organization. For one reason or another, they feel that someone or a policy or practice has victimized them. And in many cases, that may be true. But what I want to try to encourage is we transform those individuals from victims to survivors, or we try to figure out a way to get them out of the organization. We'll do that through a process. WSMs rob your organization of vitality. They rob your organization of creativity, effectiveness, and joy. I mean, we all want to work in a great organization. We want to have fun while we do our jobs if we can, but at the very least, we shouldn't have a lot of drama, both circling us and involving us. So, and many of these whining, sniveling malcontents, they get joy out of watching other people suffer from their drama. So we've got to figure out how to disconnect that. And then this is another one, most importantly, robs your organization of productivity. In short, allowing malcontents, also known as difficult people, to exist. Even thriving organization is crippling it. So we're going to talk about that. One of the things I'd like to point out in Jim Collins' best-selling book, Good to Great, he had identified 3 roles that every leader in an organization, these leaders could be first-line supervisors, managers, or directors. And he uses the metaphor of the bus to represent the organization. He says that one of the most important jobs you have is get the right people on the bus. Once you have the right people on the bus, you need to put those people in the right places on that bus. In other words, put them in the right jobs. And maybe more importantly, the focus of this webinar is, third and most importantly, get the wrong people off the bus. The organization is going to be impacted in many number of negative ways because we have the wrong people on the bus, and we're not challenging them. We're not getting them off the bus. Many of us won't do it because we fear confronting people. Many of us have this fear of confronting people in either negative ways. We don't know how to do that. We feel uncomfortable when doing it. We'll try to give you some tools and some skill sets that you can use to do that. Many of us fear retaliation. We feel that if we confront an individual who's got this type of behavior, that they'll file suit on us. They'll file a grievance on us. I say do it anyway. Your people are looking to you for leadership and for action, because every day they probably tell us, I wish somebody would do something about this individual. Fear of getting sued is big, but it's not insurmountable. I always tell employees that said, I'll sue you. Okay, bring your attorney, I'll bring mine, and we'll see who goes. But that's just the way business goes. And finally, many of us fear not being liked. We have this need to be liked, and we've got to get over that. We must develop a mindset that we are going to commit to challenge these types of individuals. A good friend of mine, a retired chief, Todd Renshaw, came up with courage to confront. And I think that's an excellent way to look at it. We have to have the courage to confront these individuals. We have to create a practice, a process, and a skill set which will allow us to do that. And it ought to be easier once we get through that process. Job 1. And in my mind, everyone here should be thinking about implementing a requirement, even in the job description, that makes it everyone's responsibility in the organization to create a harmonious work environment. Don't just say it, put it in the job description, require it. But you've got to be specific enough to know what people know what that means. My position is creating a harmonious work environment is coming to work, pleasant, friendly, encouraging others to do good, encouraging yourself, lifting people up, not putting people down. These are the dynamics of creating a harmonious work environment. It can be done. All you have to do is take some time and incorporate the harmonious work environment requirement into your job descriptions. Include it into your performance reviews so that an individual comes in, whether you're required to do one every 6 months or a year, that they are going to be informed of how they're doing on creating a harmonious work environment. We know who these individuals are. Many of them are team players. They're going to be called the bright stars of your organization. They may even be the hard worker of your organization, that 80%, which I'll show you in a minute. Most importantly, this expectation has to be related to everyone in the organization, incumbents and in new employees. So how do we get this started? The success of this process will start at hiring. And what I mean by that, and I hope all of you are creating opportunities for onboarding, this is the leader's opportunity to sit down with every new hire and welcome them to the organization. But not just welcome them and have a short conversation, but genuinely have a conversation between this new hire and you, and then create a face-to-face opportunity. I would suggest creating a checklist first, and that checklist should go right down the page from welcome to have a great day at the very bottom. But ask them, go over the individual items you feel are important, such as the work ethic in the organization. Work is done here. It's okay to have fun. One of the entitlements there that I believe an employee is entitled to is a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. That's about the only real entitlement in an organization an individual has, other than what we now know is requirements to have a safe, clean environment, working environment. The expectation of everyone's responsibility to help support a harmonious working environment has to be emphasized in the onboarding. This is your opportunity to have a one-on-one with a new employee. This is the ability of you to have an impact on the culture, or creating a culture in your organization, and in some cases maybe even changing the culture of your organization to something from what it is now. And we also want to emphasize, do not constantly bring drama to the workplace. It's okay. I mean, many police departments and other criminal justice agencies are very small, and we tend to become friends. That's okay. From time to time, an individual is going to bring drama to work. You deal with it, you help them go through life's problems, and we go on down the road. But I'm talking about the individual that constantly bring drama every day, and then it just wears on everybody's nerves. I think one of the things you need to constantly at least look at is social media. It's such a real time issue in many workplaces. You need to have a social media policy, and you need to let them know what that policy is. And this is even more important within a criminal justice environment, where we know that everything that's put on social media can be seen instantaneously and go around the globe in minutes. But make sure you also ask about personal and professional goals when you're going to onboarding, so you get an idea how you can help this individual achieve those goals. And also may even give some of the goals that you expect them to develop while in the organization. Ask them about them personally. Learn names of their spouses, children, pets, hobbies, and interests. You have to be seen as genuinely interested in these people, and you really need to believe that. Share some of yourself as well. They need to know your interests and what you're doing. But at the end, let them know that you're glad they're with you, you're part of the team, and then you're creating this expectation. So it's part of the process. And then we talk about the leadership skills of the 21st century. These are the three most common mentioned skill sets now for leadership, and that is the role of coach, mentor, and servant leader. If you really look at all the leadership materials that's being published today, you're seeing these three terms most commonly used interchangeably when they're basically different. But certainly, everyone needs to be developing understanding. The number one I see is the servant leadership, particularly if you're the leader of your organization. You might want to do some research at Robert Greenleaf Institute of what is servant leadership? How can you put other people before yourself? See to their needs and be genuinely interested in them. So coaches work with, not over people. Mentors model and facilitate. And finally, servant leaders care for their subordinates and put their interests and well-being even above their own. In other words, do you love your coworkers and truly care for their welfare and attend to their needs before tending to your own? That's the gist of servant leadership. Now let's look at the 10-80-10 organizational paradigm. And this is the organization, any organization, many of us have organizational charts in our offices that basically have hierarchical. You see the leader at the top and it comes down in a pyramidal shape, and you've got different spans of control and jobs and specializations indicated on your hierarchy. This is just another organizational chart. And the reason I put it out here is because every one of your employees can fit in this chart. At the very top of an organization, you'll notice I have stars indicated. These are the individuals, these are self-starters, hard-working, self-motivated, they need little or no supervision. Our job as managers and leaders of these people is to make sure that they don't burn themselves out. And you'll notice on the slide I talk about the rule of stars, and that is that stars burn twice as bright, half as long. So our job is kind of to woe them, not allow them to be, these are the go-to people. So when you're a leader, a manager or first-line supervisor, you have a problem, you have an issue, these are the people you like to go to. I challenge you, don't do that every time, because there are people within this solid employee section here that are very close to the top. You can use them, develop their interests, and ultimately get them into that star status. But your most important reason for not doing that is the burnout of the stars. Then you'll notice in the middle section, those are the 80% of your employees, just good, hard-working people. They just need leadership, coaching, and mentor. But the problem with this whining, sniveling malcontent is that the paradigm is almost flipped. And that is that these malcontents almost monopolize your time. They've created a situation where they are taking 70 to 80% of your time dealing with them and their disciplinary issues, their behavior issues, or their performance issues. And you don't have the time to spend with those solid employees. And that's the gist of this webinar today is let's flip that paradigm. Let's get back to putting our time where it can be the most good, and that's on these solid employees. And finally, you see the malcontents in the bottom. I also call those people dark stars. And these individuals are their own stars in their minds. They practice their methodology on everybody, and they can, in fact, infect the rest of them. So you'll see from time to time some solid employees that are hovering around the bottom of that chart there that actually make the trip into the malcontent because of the effect of another malcontent on them. So this is the point of the webinars, to try to talk about those, how to flip this paradigm. One of the best books on, and I'm going to start by saying one of the best books on management, leadership, is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. This book was written originally in the 1930s. It's an excellent book. But ask yourself this: if you were a leader in an organization and you were following something of how Dale Carnegie suggests, he says these are 3 things you should never do: is criticize, condemn, or complain. Now ask yourself, how do you manage an organization, get other people to do the things you need to have them do, and never without criticizing, condemning, or complaining? And I think that's a huge challenge, but it puts you in the right idea with being a coach, a mentor, and a leader, particularly a servant leader. But Dale comes back within the book, and he has a chapter dedicated to those employees who just don't respond to never criticizing, condemning, or complaining. And those are your whining, sniveling malcontents. And I highly recommend this book to you. It's one of the best management books on the market. So identifying, number 1, you have to identify the WSMs. And that should be no problem, since I created an exercise for you at the beginning of this webinar that kind of helped you focus on who that one person might be. And maybe you had a multi-headed hydra that came up and you have multiple heads on that issue. So you have at least started with the identification. And remember the exercise I had you at the beginning. So that tells you who they are. Those faces are job number 1. You may only have one. You could have a number of them. Whoever told you leading would be easy simply understated the truth. I always like to point out that every supervisor, manager, or director has a part of his or her salary's SOB pay. And yes, that means exactly what I say, but here's the thing. Every one of us have to earn it from time to time. And that is one of the most difficult jobs that we have. So first, most importantly, gather your facts. We all know we operate in this very litigious world where employees challenge what you say and how you do it. But one of the first and most important things, start gathering your facts about this individual. Why is this person a problem employee? Articulate that. Is it work productivity? Is it attitude? And attitude is like beauty. Everyone knows what it is when they see it, but it's very hard to describe, but I think you can do it. This requires that you do your homework. You got to keep it specific and articulable. You need to speak to supervisors, managers. I caution you about talking to coworkers. Now, here's the way those usually come up, is in casual conversation. If you're practicing management by wandering around, you're going out and you're visiting in different parts of your department, visiting with different people at different times of day, and you're going to hear things, you're going to talk about things, and sometimes somebody may say, well, there's a problem with what's going on at roll call and da-da-da. You have to get specific, but you're always scanning that environment to find out what's going on. You also want to look for positive comments. Have there been positive comments about an employee? The absence of positive comments tells you a great deal. I also want to remind everybody that during this time we've got opportunities for you to ask questions. Feel free to do that, and the moderator will feed those questions to me at the very end of the seminar. So the other thing is they want to schedule a face-to-face meeting, but first you want to create a script. All great leaders should have three-part script when they offer criticism. This is just Management 101, and many of you have heard this. You start with a positive statement. This may be very difficult depending on how challenging this employee is, but you can find something positive to say about this individual. Then you want to talk about your issues. What are the performance issues? Be specific as you can. And then at the end, you always want to end on a positive note, such as, I hope you decide you want to remain with us. You could be a great employee. Now, that's creating an expectation. It's also planting a seed of thought. And I always tell people this when I bring them in. I said, we're going to talk about your problem, my problem, or our problem, but we're at the end of this meeting, we're going to have this problem identified. Find out if there are any issues affecting the employee. Many employees may have personal issues that they're not sharing at work, and it's creating the negativity in them. So don't be afraid to ask, hey, is there something going on in your life we could help you with that somehow or another that you need to share, and so on. Discuss why you're having this meeting. You may not want to use whining, sniveling, malcontent. You may describe them as you've become quite a difficult person to deal with, and that difficulty is dealing in a negative way with your fellow employees. It's creating problems. Be specific about performance issues, and many of them might have them, such as if you have a department that has a mandatory traffic stop policy, not such that it's quota, and we all know that quotas are illegal, but we do know that you can create certain expectations. You're going to have 3 or 4 traffic stops a day. I don't care whether you write a ticket, whether you give a verbal warning or whatever. But if they're constantly coming in at the bottom of that productivity list, that's an issue. Is it about their attitude? Do they have a negative attitude? We need to know that. And again, you can address negative attitudes specifically by describing in very specific terms. And then also if they're creating drama. That's easy to do. You can describe that. Make sure you allow the employee to interject his or her own input at this phase. Always ask them, hey, do you have anything you'd like to share with me based on what I'm saying? And whether you have a witness in your face-to-face meeting is totally up to you. But I would also make one caveat. I would suggest that you always consider yourself being recorded, even if that employee is surreptitiously recording you. I think it's always a good idea to assume it's being recorded. That way you kind of have that thought in the back of your mind that whatever you say you may have to live with later. It has a moderating effect on you. But whether you openly record your meetings, that's between you. And keep in mind, some departments do have policies that prohibit the recording of one conversation between 2 employees. And certainly you cannot or should not record a conversation that you are not part of. Finally, the employee, make sure you convey the employee that his or her future is in their hands, not yours. This is so important in this conversation. Many times the rule of monkeys, many of us have heard about the rule of monkeys, if you take a monkey from a problem for another employee, it no longer is their problem, it's your problem. So you want to make sure that they can maintain the ownership of their problem. The final part of it is that you want to let them know that they should be part of the organization and you want them to be part of that organization. And that at the end of the day, it's up to them whether they continue on in the organization. I'll give you an example, a personal story. This is just in my case. In one of my police departments, I started noticing I had several individuals that were displaying all of the negative descriptors that I have previously talked about. They were chumming up the waters, constantly creating negativity. They became poor performers, a whole list of things. So there were 4 of them. I brought them all in for this face-to-face meeting. We went through just as I described. I had a script. We talked about the behavior specifically, and quite frankly, I told them straight up that they are in charge of their future in this organization. If they didn't change their ways, and I made it very clear, if they didn't change their ways, when I call them back in the next time, I will fire them on the spot. Now, I didn't make that as a threat. It came across a lot more personable than that, but in 45 minutes, we've got to figure out a way to percolate that down to its the gist of the communication. So they decide where they're going to be, not you. Put the problem back on them. Well, anyway, out of those 4 people, one of those people decided to turn his life around. He became a survivor. He went through the promotion process. He just got promoted as a supervisor and one of the best field supervisors in my organization, my former organization. One individual decided, hey, this is not my model. I don't want to be here anymore, and he sought greener pastures, and he's being quite successful in his new department. 2 individuals, however, made the decision, I may not ever be a complete survivor, but I'm no longer going to cause problems, so they never had to come in and see me. So we had a 100% success rate just practicing this process on those people. Now, has it been replicated? Yes, I've replicated the process in my over 33 years, not so formal as this, and I've been successful sometime and probably allowed people I should have called in for that second meeting to go way too long. You will be uncomfortable during this meeting. Endeavor to work through it. You have to be committed to challenging this employee's behaviors. You got to stay professional, and you got to remain in control of your emotions. Sometimes they know what your hot buttons are, and they're going to be able to push them. You're going to try to stay focused, try to stay positive, and do not allow them to get your emotions up. I always like to tell myself I take a mental chill pill just before I start a challenging meeting with an individual. That way, I tell myself there's no way this individual is going to be able to upset me, and work through your program that way. Wrapping up the meeting, near the end of the meeting, state clearly that the person in charge of his or her own future, he or she must realize the responsibility changes theirs, not yours. One of the things I recommend, what you might look at, is creating a PIP, or a personal improvement plan. It's very similar to what the old management by objective used to be, and it's not used as much as today as it used to be, but it's still a valid process. Inform the employee of 2 things. You will be monitoring his or her behavior to ensure that he or she does not get worse or fail to improve, and if the employee is called in again for the same topic, you will fire them, period. And do that because you're sending a message not only to that employee, but every other employee who's probably saying, thank goodness somebody's doing this. But a personal improvement plan is similar to an MBO, and identify clear goals and objectives that are measurable and articulable. Normally this has a time frame. I typically tell them, I'm going to be monitoring this over the next 6 months, and we'll just see how that goes. However, if their behavior doesn't dramatically improve or it gets worse quickly, then that second meeting is going to need to take place quicker than you thought. You want to schedule regular review opportunities on your calendar. If you go to Outlook, you can set it up as a task on a date and a time, and just put that in there so that it comes up and reminds you, hey, you need to look at this individual for progress. If you have monthly reports that articulate statistics on individuals, you could use that. If not, you could go to their first-line supervisor, ask them. There's a number of feedback mechanisms you can utilize, but important, you need to monitor this individual. If the overall performance and behavior of this individual does not change for the better, implement final phase, which is termination. Be resolved, this is not a 3 strikes you're gone deal, and mean it. Many employees have gotten the idea, well, we have to have progressive discipline, we have to have this, 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 and this before we can move to that. But you've probably already done that with this individual. You've probably let them go too long with this negative attitude, this drama, and now you're going to have to take action. Have a commitment to challenge and follow through. Other employees will see that you're holding people accountable. And another one of the descriptors we see all the time is responsible. We're holding people responsible. Well, the flip side of that coin, it's the two sides of one coin, is accountability and responsibility. So once a person's been held responsible, now you got to hold them accountable, and that sometimes is tough love. They will also see that the individual that they have known the whole time as a whining, sniveling malcontent is either one, not changing, or two, is change individual. We're very, very forgiving about people's past behaviors. If that person will make the effort, we typically make that effort to meet that. They will appreciate that someone is finally stepping up to challenge this individual. So you're also really accomplishing a number of very valuable retention practices by implementing this practice or this process. Now, I know some of you out there might have civil service, whether it be Texas or some other state civil service. Having been a chief of police of a civil service city in Texas for 15 years, truly, I feel for you who are in that kind of a system. It is, in my opinion, that this process can still be utilized effectively. It is nothing more than a process of documentation with a commitment to take action on the end of that. The process provides notice to performance issue. PIPs are totally acceptable, even in civil service, and it's typically treated as a document of negative content, although I do understand in Texas that the Attorney General has ruled that not every letter of negative content shall be put in the official civil service file, but I still believe you can do it. It's cost effective, it's inconvenient at times, but you've got to do it, particularly in these civil service cities. And you have made a point, drawn a line in the sand, now you have to walk the talk. At-will employment. For most of us, our agencies operate in an at-will employment status. Okay, before you start getting giddy, remember that many of our policies, rules, and regulations have waived at-will employment. That we've created basically a due process model, which requires a couple of things, but it's still one of the things you've got to give this process. In this process is notice. You've got to give the individual notice. You've got to provide an opportunity for rebuttal or input. Then with a period to allow for improvement, take adverse action if adverse action is necessary. You have a winning combination for winning any lawsuit filed for wrongful termination if you go through that process. Again, I would also, before you terminate anyone, confer with your HR manager and work with them to get that process done properly so that you will win most confrontations, particularly legal ones. From malcontents to stars, just keep in mind it can happen. I've described to you a couple of employees that I've actually worked with that have made that transition. They were malcontents under every definition I've given you today. They've made that transition to a star, and they continue to maintain that performance. And I've had others that have been borderline malcontents, and they have made that transition to more of the middle of the diamond paradigm. It will happen. You have to have faith that you're doing the right thing for the correct reasons. You've got to talk the talk and walk the walk. So you can't yourself be known as a drama queen or drama king. You've got to walk this as well in the organization, creating that culture. Living with the WSMs, and I like to call WSMs is also the WMDs of organizations, which is weapons of management or morale destruction. These people can affect morale in an organization, and you really want to create an awesome workplace. That's what you want to do. And then you tell that star, that malcontent, it's your pick, it's your choice. Retention. Two of the most common reasons listed for a person to leave an organization is drama or first-line supervisors. So I'm going to tell you, I'm using Jim Collins' objectives, is it's very important that you get the wrong people off the bus. It is one of the most important things you can do for your organization, the people who work there. And recruitment is diminished if you do not have people leaving that organization who need to be. Flipping the paradox, utilizing the process of commitment to challenge puts the proper amount of focus on your time commitment, on the right priorities, which is to deal with your middle 80% of your employees as well as those top 10%, and stops the whining, sniveling, malcontent, robbing you and your co of your ability to use your time effectively. And also, the WSM is no longer in charge of this paradox. So you've got to flip that paradigm and so that you're in charge. Finally, 3 of the most important functions of leaders to get the right people in the organization, assign them to the right jobs, and get the right people or the wrong people off the bus. And at this point, I'd like to also point out that in any organization, we all have limited resources. But we have, I would tell you, if you need to flip the culture of your organization, if you need to figure out where you are is not where you want it to be, I would put as much money and time and effort in addressing your first-line supervisors. These are the men and women that really are the most important cogs in your organization. Spend that money on them. You will not regret every dime you put in that, and you will see that the overall culture of the organization will in fact start to shift. Difficult employees are challenged but manageable. Let's develop a commitment to challenge these individuals. And create an expectation that it's everyone's job to contribute to a fun, drama-free, productive workplace. I can't emphasize that enough. Again, remember, these are incumbents, people who already work there, as well as those who you bring on board. One of the best ways to do that, again, is onboarding. And when you have to discipline an employee, might I suggest you look at a new, evolving process out there called education-based discipline. It's coming out of LASO, Los Angeles County SO, through Sheriff Baca, also known as Dr. Baca, and he has came out in 2009, a process where you're relying less on suspensions without pay, which is considered a negative type of reinforcement. And so you might want to do some homework in education-based discipline. Another thing you can do that many people have tried and with some success is what we call a career day. If you have an individual that's come up through your organization, you want to try what's called resetting the clock. Bring them in, set the new standards of expectations, and say, look, why don't you take the day off or tomorrow off with pay? And you need to think about whether you want to be part of this organization and whether you're going to live up to these new expectations. Now, that creates a number of things. Legally, if they come back, that means they've accepted your new requirements, and they've accepted their new world in the organization. So consider that, and it doesn't cost you much. And at the end of the day, you don't have an employee who feels like a victim. You don't have an employee that's got a negative attitude because you've taken money out of his or her pocket. And typically, those kinds of processes affect families as well. And in the 21st century workplace, we have to be concerned with family workplace values. Many of the younger employees are really demanding balanced family workplace values, and we're going to have to address those. So you want to create a fun, drama-free, productive workplace. Develop an onboarding process that starts by truly conveying to the new employee that you care about them and that they're welcome in the organization. Convey warmth, caring, and creating clear understanding expectations for success in that organization. And when as often as possible, lift people up by complimenting and refusing to play the put-down game. Many of us, I noticed in the roster of people attending today, many of you are CJ professionals, but not just in criminal justice. Many of you are in government or in other places working in the public sector. Keep in mind that one of the things we've developed over time is a culture of putting people down in a sarcastic way, even in a humorous way. But I challenge everybody to start today in lifting people up. Take the opportunities we get every day to deal with people in a positive way. When they tell you something that they've done good, lift them up. And when you start seeing one of your coworkers kind of slipping back into that sarcastic, humorous modality, just take your hands about waist high, just show a lifting up sign. They'll get it immediately. And it starts changing the culture of your organization from an organization that kind of focuses on negativity to one that focuses on positivity and lifting up other people. And finally, try to lead in a way that displays a genuine care for your subordinates using methods that rely less on criticizing, condemning, and complaining, and more on lifting people up, creating warmth, and a genuine concern for their welfare. And you will be well on your way to creating a fantastic workplace where people want to join and stick around, not to mention be a fun, productive work team. This is not an easy process, but is necessary if you want to spend your time leading, coaching, mentoring, rather than dodging and confronting the WSMs of the world. Again, I remind you there are questions that will be taken and shortly be given to me by the moderator. I want to thank you on behalf of my cohorts at the School of Criminology, Criminal Justice, and Strategic Studies for taking time out of your day to be part of our webinar. Also, if you know anyone who's interested in furthering their careers and pursuing a master's degree in public administration, might I just ask you to suggest to them to look at our new program at Tarleton State. And also, if they're not interested in a PA degree, we have a dynamic and world-class group of academics on board at the School of Criminology. And we've got, check out our undergraduate and graduate programs and institutes. And again, I thank you for participating today, and if there's any questions, Heather?
Yeah, absolutely. This has been an outstanding presentation today, GM. Thank you so much for the time that you put into it. We do have a number of questions, and we're going to spend the next 5 to 10 minutes addressing questions. And if for some reason we don't get to your question, I see that GM posted his contact information on the screen. You're welcome to reach out to him to have an offline conversation. So with that, let's go ahead and start the question period. The first one is, for those of us who are not supervisors, but rather coworkers of the dramatic employee, what are some suggestions to help make change?
Well, that's a great question, and oftentimes they experience the WSM on a more personal and constant level than leaders. I would first off I always tell people, try to treat them as professionals. Adult professional model is what I like to suggest. So if you have an opportunity and it's not going to be a real confrontation, ask them if they'll go out for a cup of coffee or sit down with you, take them to Starbucks, buy them one, and say, look, I got to tell you that the situation you created is causing me extreme problems. But remember that people don't want to have a focus on others, so kind of keep it how you feel, how you're being impacted by their behavior, and let them know, hey man, I kind of wish you'd help me out. I'm having a real problem with this, and treat them as adult professionals. Let them try to change. If that doesn't work, then you can come back and go to the next step, and I would highly recommend you take it to a supervisor and be specific. And that supervisor, then it's in their court, and hopefully they've listened to this webinar and they'll have some tools and a process they can use to confront that individual.
That is such great advice. Thank you, GM. The next question we have is regarding the face-to-face meetings. You give the employee notification of when the meeting is and what will be discussed so they aren't walking into the meeting blind?
I don't normally do that, and I'll tell you why. They already know that. If you've created a culture in your organization where you're lifting people up, you're showing genuine concern, you've already had a conversation with your entire department probably saying, we want you to create a harmonious work environment. So this is not an ambush. However, if you want to give them a heads up and say, we're going to be talking about your career in the organization, every conversation I've had with individuals that came into my office based on the WSM model, they already knew why they were there. I said, and I usually started by, I appreciate you taking your time to come see me, In police world, most cops already know that if you're going to the chief's office, 80% of the time it's not going to be a good deal, which is why I also recommend chiefs and leaders don't just call people to their office when there's something bad. Call them in to say, hi, how you doing? Welcome people in. Have an open door policy. But on the other hand, notice is going to take place on the second phase more than I do the first one. They may consider it an ambush, but you know what? In a way, maybe they're getting a little bit of their own medicine, and that you've been ambushed by them their entire career because of the way they operate. So bringing them in, confronting them with their behavior, gives you an opportunity to flip the paradigm.
Thank you so much. The next question we have is, what's the time frame you would accept for someone who was given a decision-making leave day, came back, but 2 years later has slipped back to where they are below standards on their evaluation?
Wow, that's a great question. As my paradigm suggests, people are going to slip in and out of that. They can actually go to the stars and something happened to them and they've slipped back into the 80%. And that's okay. That's still acceptable performance and behavior. The real question is what happens to an individual that gets re-victimized? I think a reminder meeting, I'll tell you what I've done before, and this works well. You take that diagram that I used, the diamond, and you give them a red pen. And when you're having this conversation with them, hey, draw on this diagram. Tell me where you think you are in the organization, because you're going to explain stars, hard workers, and malcontents when you're having your face-to-face. So you take that diagram, I put it on a sheet of paper, and large enough, that doesn't take up the full page, and say, tell me where you think you are in this organization. They'll typically take their pen and they'll put it probably somewhere just under the stars line. That's been my experience. And then I say, okay, and you give them a different color pen, give them a blue pen, and say, okay, now tell me where you think your coworkers think you are in this organization. And typically, that's the eye-opener. That's when they don't like self-reflection, and they certainly don't like being challenged. But when you ask them to give input on where they think their fellow workers, their coworkers would put them, that's a wake-up call. Typically, they'll put it just under, but they will almost never put it down in the whining, sniveling malcontent. Now, you talk about this employee 2 years later, you bring that diagram out and say, hey, 2 years ago when we had this conversation, this is where you said you were. Do you think you've slipped any? Do you think your coworkers might think you've slipped some? Or do the same diagramming and have them do it again. But I think a reminder is not a bad thing. We all from time to time might suffer from drama, our own personal problems. You know, the world is complicated. Let's have some heart for people. There may be something going on. But I would say, just give them a courtesy and have them come in and say, hey, you remember that conversation we had 2 years ago? This is kind of that, not nearly as threatening. I want to see, is there something going on? Because I see some slippage. And that starts that conversation.
That is such great advice. Oftentimes in life things happen outside the workplace, right?
Right.
And it's just a matter of being whether you decide to be upfront about it or, you take a couple days, maybe you're not optimal for a couple days. But, actually in that vein, is it best if you're having a bad day or a bad week because X is happening? What's the best way to kind of announce that with really trying not to draw attention to yourself, even though it's pretty obvious to others you're having a bad week?
Oh, I agree. I mean, we all have bad days. We come to work when we probably don't feel well. It's the American work ethic that we do come to work sick. We've asked for an examination of that. We encourage an examination of that. But at the end of the day, people really do like going to work in most cases. They like working with other people. In many cases, people work not because of the great challenging opportunities they might express, but they get to work with people they like. They get to work with people that's going to create fun and joy in their life, not drama in their life. So I guess the best way to gauge your own is to be honest with yourself. My employees just tell me, we knew when to come in and talk to you and when not to come in and talk to you. I didn't realize I was wearing my feelings that on my sleeve, but it happens. And I would try to say, if you're not having a great day, you might want to pick another day to be a very challenging person. On the other hand, don't forestall the action just because you're not feeling well or don't feel at the top of your game. Some action's better than no action, particularly when it comes to a whining, sniveling malcontent.
Great advice again. We have time for just a couple more questions. The next one is, do you recommend having someone from HR sit in the meeting with the problem employee?
Yeah, I covered that in the slide. I didn't quite hit it as hard as I should have in the end of the presentation, but whether you have an HR witness in your confrontation, your challenge to confrontation meeting is totally up to you. I personally never used one. I consider that, I'm kicking it upstairs now. This is my opportunity to let that individual know that he or she's on my radar. This is what I'm promising to do if you don't take control of your own career. but including HR kicks it into another phase. That's almost, to me, that looks a lot more threatening than I want it to be. So, but I've had like a mid-manager in the meeting with me if I felt that there was going to be ramifications. Again, I always recommend that you believe that you're being recorded, whether you're recording it or they are. You should operate under the assumption that you are being recorded. So, but it's certainly once that meeting has taken place and you continue to monitor, and before you terminate or even start that process, you should at that point get HR professionals involved. But I don't know that I would call an HR professional into that meeting because it just, you know, we used to call that kicking it over to City Hall. If we keep it in the house, the police house or whatever your organization house is, that's between you and this person. Although it's up close and personal, it's not yet kicked it over to the big house. So I'd recommend if you want a witness, get one from in your organization, a mid-manager, and maybe even that subordinate's mid-manager if you have that type of organization that's large enough. If not, just get your second in command or a sergeant to come sit in. Usually they can add some enlightening comments, because while the subordinate may not look at you as an authority on their day-to-day behavior, they certainly won't argue with that supervisor whom you've already talked with and know that they believe the same way you do.
Thank you so much. Again, excellent advice. The next question we have is, how would you handle an employee who was very productive but suddenly slipped down and it's obvious that they have some sort of substance abuse problem? Not necessarily on the job, but perhaps outside the job.
That's another excellent question. In this case, I don't know what type of organization that person is that asked that question, but you're almost, if you don't have random drug testing in your organization, you probably have what we call articulable probable cause or articulable cause. So if an individual's behavior is slipping and you can relate it to what you believe might be substance abuse, I think you owe it not only to that employee, but every citizen that employee is going to interact with, every coworker they're going to interact with. And remember, I told you, if you're a supervisor, if you're a leader, a certain amount of your pay is SOB pay, and you're going to have to earn it. So you might just have to refer them to either an EAP or whoever performs your drug testing for cause. And I'd have them ordered into drug testing immediately. And look, remember this, the person you save may be that person, and that they are in denial about their substance abuse, and or it could be a mental thing that they need to work through, and they could be referred to EAP, which is confidential, and you remind them of that when you bring them in.
Great. Again, excellent advice. And finally, what we'll do is we'll wrap up with this last comment that we have. It's not a question, but it's Dr. Cox, your presentation is right on task and was very helpful in refreshing the needs and methods to deal with difficult staff. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much.
With that, yeah, go ahead. I was just going to ask you for some closing remarks.
No, I just say thank you very much for the opportunity. I truly want everybody to work in a fantastic organization where people have fun and they're productive and people look forward to coming to work. And I truly mean this when I say you can call me. My email, although is not on there, I'll give it to you quickly. It's gmcox@tarleton.edu. Feel free to give me a call and ask me any question you might have. If I haven't experienced it in 33 years as chief of police or 44 years as a cop, I don't believe anybody has. And I can tell you, I have plenty of scars and bruises from all the bad mistakes I've made. And if any of my experiences can help anybody, I'm more than glad to do that.
Great. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for providing your full contact information. I'm sure the audience will find it very useful. With that, this actually concludes our presentation today. GM, thank you again for everything that you've done. To all the attendees, following the webinar, a post-survey will show up, and we ask that you take a couple minutes to complete it. And with that, this concludes our webinar. Everybody stay safe. GM, thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.